Let's talk about something that sounds a little strange at first: happiness and global power. What in the world do those two have to do with each other? Well, we're going to connect the dots, and it all boils down to one big question. What does it really mean for a nation to be happy?
All right, let's just start at the beginning. A super simple question, right? What is happiness? You'd think that's easy, but it's not. The answer is totally different depending on who you ask and, what's going on in their life at that exact moment.
I mean, for you and me, on a personal level, happiness is usually pretty straightforward. It's about getting something you want or need right then and there. It's that quick hit of satisfaction we're all kind of chasing after.
Think about it. For one person, happiness could be as simple as a piece of chocolate. For another, maybe it's just an ice-cold drink on a sweltering day. Or, hey, if you're having a really bad day, maybe it's a glass of something strong. These are all those little personal moments of, that's better.
Okay, but what happens when you take that idea and blow it up, like to the size of an entire country, especially a global superpower? What does happiness even mean then? All of a sudden, the answer gets way, way more complex. And it's definitely not about chocolate anymore. Well, for a country like the United States, national happiness, or, let's be real, national security and economic power is tied to one thing. One single, incredibly powerful resource: oil. And I'm not just being poetic here. This isn't some metaphor. The actual physical flow of oil is directly connected to a nation's ability to flex its muscles on the world stage, to keep its economy running, and to protect its interests everywhere.
And just to be super clear, we are not talking about cooking oil here. Nope, we're talking about crude oil, black oil, the stuff that is, quite literally, the lifeblood of our entire modern world.
I mean, this is the stuff that powers fighter jets and tanks. A change in its price can send shockwaves through the global economy. If you have it, you have incredible power. And if you don't, well, history's shown us that people are willing to go to war for it.
So here's the bottom line. When you're talking about global politics, oil means one thing: control, influence, power. And this whole abstract idea, it actually played out in a really fascinating and kind of weird real-world moment.
Yeah, this huge concept of oil and power was perfectly captured at the White House in a way that was both super public, but also kinda subtle. And it all centered on a little cartoon pin. Seriously.
Okay, so picture this. You've got this massive, high-stakes meeting happening. Then President Donald Trump is sitting down with the heads of major oil companies. Huge deal, right? But the first thing the press latched onto was something way sillier.
He shows up for this super serious meeting, and he's got this cartoony pin on his jacket. It's a smiling caricature of his own face, and he tells the reporters with a grin that it's Happy Trump. Of course, they had to ask him about it.
And this moment is just perfect, because it shows you the two different worlds. Out in front of the cameras, it's all jokes about a silly pin. But behind those closed doors, the conversation is about the biggest levers of power on the entire planet.
So when a reporter asks about the Happy Trump pin, he riffs on it, saying he's actually never happy and never satisfied. It's a classic bit of political showmanship, a good line for the news cycle. But the real question is, what was happening behind the punchline?
Because let me tell you, what they were actually discussing in that room was no joke. It was about the future of global energy and with it, the future of American power.
That meeting wasn't just a grip and grin for the cameras. It was a dead serious strategy session. They were talking about oil production, about U.S. energy policy, and they were focused on one country in particular, Venezuela.
Right, they were talking about production levels, the rules for investing, and most importantly, the role that American companies could play in Venezuela's future. And remember, Venezuela has some of the biggest oil reserves on Earth. And suddenly, that little pin on his jacket starts to look less like a joke and a lot more like a message.
In fact, a lot of people who watched this stuff closely saw that Happy Trump pin at that specific meeting as a quiet little signal, a sign of confidence, a nod to the fact that things were going their way when it came to U.S. policy and Venezuela's oil.
So let's put it all together. How does a goofy cartoon pin on a suit jacket end up symbolizing something as massive and as serious as global power politics?
Well, it starts out as just a weird little object, right? A pin. Then it becomes the setup for a joke with reporters. But when you place that joke in the context of a huge meeting about oil and a major geopolitical flashpoint like Venezuela, it suddenly gets heavy. It becomes a symbol of the endgame, which is always about control.
And that brings us right back to where we started. It doesn't matter if it's being talked about in secret boardrooms or hinted at with a smiling cartoon pin. The fundamental truth of modern geopolitics is this: oil is power, oil is control, and oil is influence.
So maybe the next time you see some small, seemingly random detail in the news from the world of politics, it's worth taking a second look and asking yourself, what's the real story here? What's the bigger game that's being played just out of sight?